to set up just to set up, there it popped up, and we are going to be recording this presentation portion of the meeting. The meeting is divided into two different segments. One is we're going to present some information. That portion will be recorded so that parents and community members that weren't able to attend tonight could see the presentation. There is going to be a second portion of the meeting where we're doing some small group breakout. Those will not be recorded and put on the website. So just so you know, once we break into groups to talk a little bit and get some feedback from people on what you've heard tonight, then we will not be recording. So with that, what I'd like to do now is kick off tonight's information session and meeting with by introducing Shauna Boyce, our superintendent of schools, to set the stage for what is happening here tonight.
Sit there, because I want to lay down.
Hi there, everybody. Like Mark said, I'm Shauna Boyce. I'm the superintendent of schools for Parkland School Division. And first of all, let me just say thank you very much for coming, being in attendance tonight. We want to take an opportunity to walk through a number of the details around the reason we're having this conversation, and but more importantly, to make sure that you have an opportunity to talk as well. So first of all, before I dive into all the details, let me just introduce Lorraine Stewart, the chair of the Board of Trustees, and Lorraine will introduce the rest of the elected officials, our Board of Trustees, who are here tonight.
Thank you. Thanks, Shauna. I would love to do that. Thank you to everyone for your attendance, your participation tonight. Trustees are here to listen, to learn, and to listen to perspectives. And the trustees that are here tonight, I will introduce. Vice Chair Ann Montgomery is here, and Trustee Jill Osborne is here, along with Trustee Paul McCann and Trustee Eric Cameron. That's those of us who are here for tonight. Thanks.
Thanks, Lorraine. I'll just take a quick second. You already met Mark Francis. Mark is the deputy superintendent, but I'll introduce the rest of our team that's here tonight as well. So Scott McFadden is one of our associate superintendents. Between Mark and Scott, they'll be doing most of the presenting tonight. And then also Scott Johnston is there, if he waves. There we are. Scott Johnston's another associate superintendent, as is Meg Muscolzi, and she is also another associate superintendent. So those are the members of our executive team. Also, I think most of you already know Linda Simmons, the principal of Copperhaven School. And of course, the other person on the screen is Jordy Weedman. Jordy is our director of communications, and he's here to keep us straight. Everything keeps straight through Jordy. So before we get into the actual presentation, let me just give you a little bit of background information. We've been having this conversation for quite a while about taking a look at attendance boundaries in a number of schools all the way across Parkland School Division. Quite a while ago now, the Board of Trustees at the time asked us to commission a report or get a report that would talk a little bit about capacity and attendance boundaries in school. That report was provided to this board this past January, and it had a number of recommendations in it to consider. But only some of them made sense. So what they did is they explored a number of things, and some of them, just even in their exploration, it came up that that's never going to work. We couldn't even if we thought it was a good idea, it would never work. But they still included it in the report so they could make sure that we knew they'd explored it in that sense. But in that report, like I said, a number of recommendations, only some of which really kind of made sense to explore further. And in those ones that made some sense to explore further was a mention of Copperhaven. And so that's why we're here to just have the conversation tonight about what was in the report, what implications there would be, and then the information that would get shared with the Board of Trustees. Of course, you all are very much aware of the exponential growth of population of Spruce Grove, that it's growing and growing and growing, and more people are having trouble keeping up. And so that's part of the reason that Copperhaven finds itself so full already. What are we now, 3 years old, Linda? 4 years old. See, time flies. So 4 years old. And we're already talking about capacity issues at this school. And so tonight we want to walk through the recommendations that are tied to Copperhaven. And we want to just really, more importantly, make sure that we talk with you. So at least half of the presentation tonight is not a presentation, it's a conversation where you are doing 90% of the talking. So the executive team, we're here to help host the conversation. Trustees are here to listen and ask questions and get clarification. And then I also want to and we'll talk a little bit about this later, but at the end of the night, we will also be sending out a survey to each of the families impacted and to provide everybody an opportunity to give some more robust feedback and also some time to think about it and then give feedback that way. So without me taking up any more screen time, let me turn it back over to Mark, and Mark and Scott will walk you through the presentation.
Okay. So what's going to happen is Jordy's going to share a screen with some slides that we prepared for this. So starting with the timeline that is in front of us. So Jordy, go ahead, go to the next slide. Yep. So this is actually a process that is not new. In fact, boundary reviews need to be done on an ongoing basis. With growing communities. So well over a year ago, so in January 12th, 2021, when we started hitting the capacity issues that we see, and you live as families that attend Copperhaven, you know how crowded that school is already. The board asked administration to initiate a boundary review. In order to do this, what we did is we hired an outside consultant to come in. And this is done for one main reason. One is, and that is so that it's an outside set of eyes, looking at everything from housing startups in the area, long growth, census data, growth projections from the city of Spruce Grove, county of Parkland, and town of Stony Plain. The timeline, so we're now fast forwarding to 2022. The board was received on January 18th and brought forward to the Board of Trustees. In February, the board then decided which recommendations were going forward. The report, it came with many different recommendations, some of which they investigated all sorts of different options, some of which were not feasible, and we'll touch on a few of those. And then the board gives some further direction to administration to research some of the proposals or some of the recommendations. And then bring back information for the board's consideration. That's part of what we're doing here tonight, is to bring back some of the parent feedback and get some community's perspective so the board can make a decision on how to move forward with our boundaries. The intent is to bring back a report in April to the board with a decision being made by the end of this school year. Now, what's really important is that we are not moving kids next September. Students are moving in September 2023, if indeed boundaries are moved and students are moving to a different school. So it is not for next September. And so again, April administration will be bringing a full report. That report will be public, for everyone to see. And then the board will be making a decision in May or June prior to the end of this school year, so that we then have a full year in which to implement the changes. So with that, we now have some recommendation summary. So we're going to cover some that have there's many. It was a list of 20 some recommendations. We're not covering all of them tonight. We're just going to cover the ones that kind of hit Spruce Grove, and in particular that impact Copperhaven School. Now, the first two recommendations actually don't directly impact Copperhaven School. But they do impact Woodhaven School, which, of course, as we get through, is a potential solution to some of the overcrowding that we currently see at Copperhaven. So the first two recommendations were to take Parkland Village School north of Highway 16 and turn it into a K-6 school, and then direct those Parkland Village students when they're done at Parkland Village, instead of going to Prescott, they would then go to Woodhaven School. Go ahead, Jordy. Second recommendation, and of course that has direct impact on families attending Copperhaven School, is that you would look at students that currently live in the Legacy Park region that attends Copperhaven School and direct those students to Brookwood and Woodhaven. In addition, we would look at adding more space to Copperhaven with the addition of 2 modular units. One thing I would say on this is that we are limited in space with the footprint at Copperhaven. It would require, there is some space, but some of the land is actually currently owned by the city, and so it would require a partnership with the city. Go ahead, Jordy. The next 2 recommendations we're not pursuing, but I did want to bring mention to this group of parents. The board did, the consultant did look at 2 very large changes, and these would, what I would describe as blender options. We would literally take every school in the city of Spruce Grove and redraw the boundaries for each of those schools in 2 different variations of the same recommendation. One would look at an east-west divide, and the other would look at a north-south divide. These are not being pursued for a couple reasons. One is they would both impact a huge number of families. A significant portion of all students in the attendance area in Spruce Grove would have to be redirected to school. But more importantly, both of these options did not actually solve the problem. It shifted the problem, but there wasn't an easy way to balance out attendance at all schools. You would still have, some students need to bus across town, or, you couldn't evenly divide neighborhoods. So what it was really felt was that these options did not actually solve the problem. And at the same time, it would cause a lot of hardship for a lot of people in Spruce Grove. Recommendation K, this is the what we call a pre-designated lands, undeveloped lands. So of course we have the 2 growth areas in Spruce Grove, and one in the west and one in the east. And so in the east, what we call Pioneer Land and East Pioneer, there's some undeveloped areas.
Bonnie will be raised tomorrow night.
In particular, there is areas in Tonewood and Fenwick and Easton that are not yet developed. There's no houses in those areas yet, or there's very few houses. We would pre-designate those to Woodhaven. And then very similar, the next recommendation is the exact same idea on the west end of town, which of course where Copperhaven currently serves, is we would take the area known as Shiloh, that has not yet had a lot of developments, very limited development in that area, and they would be designated to Woodhaven. And I'll show you on a map where that is. Go ahead, Jordy.
This was,
and then so sorry, and then this one here is we would be requesting new schools. So and Scott will talk a little bit about the population growth in these areas. But in both the east and west, of course, it's faster growing in the east, where in the Prescott attendance area, there's potential in the next number of years, whether that be 5 years or a decade, or for 1,400 more students. So there's actually a lot of development there, and we know that once that starts to go and starts to fill up, we know that the Shiloh area around Copperhaven, though it's still developing, there's still houses being built, has slowed down in Copperhaven, but we're expecting the Shiloh area to bring a similar number of students in future. Whether that's in 10 years or longer remains to be seen. So the board will be requesting new schools in both east and west Spruce Grove, as well as a new school in a developing area in Stony Plain. So this area here is, of course, the current attendance area of Copperhaven School. I would, of course, this most of this change centers around the Legacy Park neighborhood, which you see on this map. And then if you look to the blank area just to the left of Legacy Park, where the mouse currently is, the cursor currently is, that area is that it's right now it's a farmer's field. And we know, though, that that is the next development area. There is an area development plan with the city of Spruce Grove that does build out houses throughout that area. Once those houses begin, right now Copperhaven is already reaching or nearing capacity. Once we start getting houses there, of course, those areas we would need to direct to a new school. Go ahead, Jordy. So with that, what I'll do is I will now call on Scott McFadden, our Associate Superintendent, and he Business and Finance, and he'll talk about the numbers a little bit here.
Okay, thanks, Mark, and good evening, everyone. So I'm just going to go over some of the enrollment data. In front of you is a chart that shows the Copperhaven enrollment over the last 5 years and a projection for the 10 years into the future into 2030-32 school year. So right now, the current enrollment at Copperhaven is 745, and the adjusted enrollment is 755. The difference between the adjusted enrollment and the enrollment is just the adjusted enrollment takes into consideration the students' needs for space and programming. So that number is generally higher, or always is higher than the pure enrollment number. Jordy, can you go to the next slide? Second. Thanks. So this is a graph, obviously, of the data, and you can see that enrollment has a steady growth in this area, and it exceeds capacity in about 25, 26. It starts off in 21, 22 at about 88% capacity, exceeds capacity in 25, 26, as I mentioned, and it goes all the way up to 115% capacity by 2031 and 2032. Generally speaking, Alberta Education will look at new capacity if two things. One, a school in the area is around 85%, but they generally look at the division as a whole. So you'll see that some of the schools are underutilized, some schools are overutilized. They don't want to give you a new school for a overutilized school if you haven't adjusted the enrollment for those underutilized schools. And we know in the Copperhaven area, in the West area structure plan, there's still room for about 1,800 homes. And that is supposed to be at full build out by around 2042. So there's still a lot of room for growth in the Copperhaven neighborhood. Jordy, the next slide. Thanks. So this is Woodhaven. This is the other side of the spectrum. So Woodhaven has an enrollment of 425, an adjusted enrollment of 475. And you can see the capacity up in the top right is about 723. Jordy, can you go to the next slide? Thanks. So in this one, you can see as of today, we are at 475, and that has a utilization of 66%. It has the other problem where enrollment kind of continues to decline to about really 28, 29, where it's at 42%. And at the time the report was commissioned, this was why the Woodhaven modernization was still going on. The adjusted capacity now with that modernization is about 130 higher at 855. So that utilization then really becomes around 36% in 2028, 29. So with that, maybe I'll turn it back to Mark.
Okay, so now we're going to get just a little bit more on the specific recommendations for Copperhaven. If you did want to, on our website, and at the end of the presentation, Jordy will show where all these documents can be found on our website, but they are pages 11 and 12. So if you did want to go and read up in particular and look at some of the graphs and information we presented in short, in more detail, it is page 11 and 12. Okay, go ahead, Jordy. So the suggested change. So really what we're talking about is designating what's known as West Central and Shiloh, the areas of future development, and designate those students to Woodhaven and Brookwood. As Scott showed, we have two competing problems. One is one school that is beginning to exceed capacity and will shortly exceed capacity, and another one, because Woodhaven in particular is just had a brand new renovation. It's a beautiful, spectacular school, but it will be and continue to actually fall enrollment because there's no new enrollment areas or growth areas in the current Woodhaven attendance area. And of course, in Copperhaven, we have the yet undeveloped area that any day, houses could be, started. And then we have the Copperhaven neighborhood in particular that still has considerable development. And so any new students coming into yet undeveloped areas would then cause that explosion that would literally put us over capacity. Go ahead, go to the next slide, Jordy. So the idea with this recommendation is to look at new growth. So when there's new students coming in, they would be sent to Woodhaven and Brookwood. This would increase the capacity. Now, one of the problems, of course, with this is that we know that students currently live in that area. It is easy, for undeveloped areas. So in Shiloh, where there's no houses, literally no students yet live in the area called Shiloh. For future students, we could say, you need to, go, we're gonna designate. However, we have Legacy Park, which is that small area that is already in that development. It's a developed neighborhood. It is fully built out. It is somewhat of a contained neighborhood, and it does contain about 40 students that could attend, that are currently attending Copperhaven and could be potentially moved to Woodhaven. Now, the one thing we'd like to address right off the start is what is typically referred to as grandfathering, but the concept that some students could, could you allow students that currently attend Copperhaven to stay in Copperhaven and not send them to Woodhaven? Any new students that move into, let's say, Legacy Park area, if a new student moved in, they would go to Woodhaven, but the existing students would be allowed to finish their time at Copperhaven. Now, this is something that we have seen in either previous boundary reviews and boundary changes in the city of Spruce Grove or Parkland School Division. And of course, many growing communities, Leduc, Beaumont, Airdrie, they go through boundary reviews. Growing communities have this issue. And so you will see some different variations of the idea that some students, so for instance, you could see junior high students stay at their school. So if students are in grade, 7, 8, 9 or 8, 9, whatever the board decides, they would be allowed to finish their time, whereas elementary students would go to a new school. Now, we fully recognize the impact on students moving schools. And if some of the challenges of allowing students to stay at Copperhaven and when they're neighbor is you may be in a situation where you're running 2 buses. So there is an implication that if you ran one bus to Copperhaven and a second bus to Woodhaven and Brookwood, you would be doubling up transportation costs. So there is, of course, a valid reason to keep students at their school. We know the importance of social groups and friend groups, and the board will, be addressing that idea of legacy students or letting them stay in a school. And of course, that would be a topic of our conversations here in a few minutes. So just on here, again, this is just a map to show that area. Really, we're talking about that area that we just know is going to develop, that continued development in that west end of Spruce Grove. We do know that it is not imminent. There's no houses being developed in Shiloh, and next to Legacy Park, there's been no move on development. However, what we've been told by the city of Spruce Grove is the east of the city is nearing all of the area structure plans currently have development underway, and they can't expand any further east. So of course, we know that once all the housing startups start there, it will quickly spread here. And so even though the problem might be 5 or 10 or even more years out, it is coming in the west end, and we have to prepare for that. So with that, there's going to be some next steps. Shauna mentioned before. First of all, by tomorrow, close the day, you will be getting a survey. All people in Copperhaven, but in particular, we will be targeting people that are in the impacted areas. And of course, we know that a lot of people in Legacy Park are probably represented here tonight, and there's obviously a greater impact on them for those people that may have students that may be in this area. but everyone will get a survey. It'll be sent out. We will continue to collect information. What happens if we shift these groups? What happens if we don't? How many buses would we have to add? All that information gets collected into a very comprehensive report, and that goes to the board in April. This is a public report and will be shared publicly when it is shared with the board. So it will be something. And then there's also meeting with students, age appropriate. So for instance, we've done the same presentation and consultation in the Prescott School for the exact same idea. There's one neighborhood that's going to be looked at being moved to Woodhaven. We go out and we actually talk to students. We do some data collection from students as well. So impacted students will be consulted as well. So with that, we are going to break into small groups. We'll come back as a large group and say some few final words. One of the things that if you have any additional thoughts, please share them tonight. But if you would like to put something in writing, please email the board at board@psd.ca. And right at the end, when we come back, Jordy will show another way to share some information right on our website. So with that, what we're going to be doing is Jordy is going to be pushing us into groups, and we're going to be into 2 groups. The groups will be representative of parents. So I think we have about 10 or 11 parents here right now. We'll divide those parents into 2 groups. Members of administration will lead a short conversation where we're planning for about 20-25 minutes. But at the same time, we're willing to listen as much as we need to, and then we'll come back and share some final thoughts and then set them on their way. So with that, Jordy is going to push us into groups.